Oh
Good
yeah.
afternoon. I think we should
How's
start today
everybody
with
doing?
minimally. Let's minimally talk about how great that intro music is, and then move straight on.
Yeah, it's okay.
No, I mean it's still great, but we're not going to talk about it as long as we normally do. So,
Yeah, that's
because of that, we actually have a lot to cover today because I'm really
yes.
excited about the topic we're here to talk about, and I was very frustrated at the beginning of this week because I was like, you know what? I have a great idea for a blog post. I don't see a lot of content these days on using MCP servers, model context protocol. A, using remote ones, but B, using them in situations that aren't Claude Desktop. So it's like,
Mhm.
well, let me go ahead and create a blog post and show people how to do that. And I opened up Visual Studio Code and I put my hands on the keyboard and I was like, oh, I don't really know how to do this at all. Like I don't know how to do any step of this. I don't know how to host a remote MCP server. I
Mhm.
don't know how to consume one even if I was able to figure it out. And I don't know how to do any of these things in JavaScript. Everything that you see these days is written in Python because Python gets priority with AI, and then JavaScript usually gets a quick follow on. But we're kind of this show, Andres. Let me kind of step back and set the stage here. This show that you and I do every 2 weeks is really riding the bleeding edge of AI.
Yep.
That's what we like to do. You know, it started as let's try new things, right? A year ago when we started doing the show. And then we just kind of found the niche of well, let's keep people up to date on AI because so much AI stuff is happening right now. So let's try it out for ourselves and learn.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many
And
things coming day in, day out, right? That you take for granted. You read the blog post and oh yeah, this sounds cool, but getting to the how do you do it is where it gets complicated. And it's since it's so at the edge, there's not a lot of content to follow, right? So that's kind of what you saw this week. Uh,
yes, I think what I
but
discovered this week is that it's not really a supported capability. That's uh, not out of the box. We're going to talk about some interesting things, the loops that I had to go through to get it done. But before we go into any sort of detail, I think we should level set and talk a little bit about detail of what we're doing today.
yeah,
Do you know what we're doing today? Because if you do, I'll let you do
uh,
it. I'll let you talk about
no,
it.
vaguely, right? So I'm kind of piggybacking from your stress and your work right now, and taking that advantage for to go over it and for me to learn and get on the same page. So let's talk about what you're doing, what we're doing.
Excellent.
I'll include myself.
Okay. Yeah. So before we get into that, let's say hello to everybody that is watching. Hey, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Hand wave. And if
Nice,
anybody else wants to
welcome.
say hi, we'll bring you on screen too. So it's good to have you here. What we're going to be doing today is kind of the next evolution in our workflow progression with AI. So our first one that we did weeks ago, Andres, was multi-agent collaboration. And that was doing
That's a
it
fun one.
natively inside of AWS with Amazon Bedrock. That was
Mhm.
building agents inside of Bedrock and using their system to make the agents talk to each other. Now, all the agents were able to call tools, which were Lambda functions, and they were all very specific to AWS's implementation. Nothing wrong with that. You know,
That's
I
fun.
for one, am not one for the vendor lock-in argument. I'm okay when once you do that, then
We're
you
a
start actually
little bit
getting
past
what to
that
use. Yes, we are.
with what
Yes,
we
we are.
do.
Yes. And so the next one that we did was about the model context protocol or MCP. And you and I built an MCP server.
Yep.
And did I cut out there for a second?
No, no, you're good.
Nope. Okay. We built an MCP server that ran locally on my machine that Claude Desktop could talk to. And then we talked a little bit about the security issues with running local MCP servers on your machine because your credentials could get scraped You could
The cloud.
have a
Yeah.
poisoned. There's a whole lot of stuff that could go wrong when things run locally. So the next progression that we have is twofold. I'm actually excited because what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about running MCP servers remotely in the
Mhm.
cloud, get that code off of our desktops, and protect ourselves a little bit more. And B, using them outside of Claude Desktop because that's cool. It's a really cool showcase. Social media really likes seeing me type into a chat, "Hey, what's in my garden?" Because that was what we built, right? That was Garden Buddy. What's in my garden? And it goes and fetches from my database what's in the garden and it spits it back to me. That's cool. That's a good social media trick. It's not practical. I'm not building production grade software with that, right? Having Claude
That's
Desktop as part of
because that's
is not uh, is not what I want to do. So what I actually want to do is enable agents to communicate with these MCP servers. So I
yep.
want something that's running in the cloud, talking to tools that are also in the cloud.
I
So we're
love the
getting
use case.
all the way
I mean,
away from our desktop. Yes. Now that's technically what we're doing. And well, Andres, what I want you to do, because you have really good insight and vision, is I want you to come up with use cases once we actually get this working and you can see what it looks like when we are composing agents and running tools in the cloud,
mhm.
intentional double in the cloud, because we're not doing anything local. Okay,
Cool.
great. So how are we going to do this? That's a good question. That is a really good question. So the first problem that I was struggling with, I mean, it's to me, it's the way MCP should be used, not necessarily on steroids. Every time we've talked about this, I've completely glossed over using MCP inside of IDEs, so inside of your code editors. Let's have it autocomplete code. Let's have it do things for me as I'm typing my code, so I don't have to go do those things, right? Absolutely good use cases. You could also argue that there's valid use cases for having those run local so we can manipulate things on the file system. We're going to gloss over those. I'm
Mhm.
talking about building software and uh, not using not using it to build software, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
see my
Yeah,
camera
it's
turning on.
more yeah, because you were moving your hand. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's the use your agent with its tools or with available tools, right? Which is what
Mhm.
we're exposing via MCP for an application use, right? For you're building an application that you want to sell, something SaaS, right? But it's powered by agents and somebody else's MCP server that runs.
Don't
um,
mind me. I'm just getting my camera back to where I want.
yeah. And using an MCP server that runs remotely and not locally for just maintaining my own garden, and it's a full application, not just for local use or like you said for development, which is
Mhm.
just you typing, right? So it's actual end user facing functionality that we would want to expose this to.
Yes, and I thought of the way I
So
wanted to say it slightly
quick
more
hi for
succinctly.
Daryl.
Hey, Daryl,
Hello,
thanks for
Daryl.
joining us. So, really, I want to focus on cases of us building software with tools instead of building software with tools. No, I said it worse. Anyway, so let's talk about our options for hosting MCP servers in the cloud. I did see last week that an announcement was made from Frederic, uh, who he published MCP MIDI, which is a
Okay.
plugin
Yeah, I
for
saw that.
MIDI middleware to be used inside of Lambda to create a remote MCP server using Lambda. Now, part of my miseducation here, and I still don't really have a great answer for this, is I don't quite understand how Lambda works in situations where I'm calling remotely, because MCP servers have two ways they communicate: standard input output standard IO,
Mhm.
and HTTP, usually using server sent events. Now, server sent events is a real-time messaging protocol. I love those, that maintains an active open connection. And it
Yep.
just, as data is ready on the server side that's holding that connection, it feeds it back down to the client. And Lambda doesn't really do that. It can stream responses, and maybe that's what people are using, but it, I don't know, to me, it just didn't seem like a great option. And I couldn't figure it out either. I built my Lambda function, my my MCP server in Lambda. I used MCP MIDI, but being on the cutting, bleeding edge of everything, there's not really documentation for it. There's how to build your servers, which is what we're seeing everywhere. Let's all build servers. But it's not let's consume said servers, because nobody's really consuming them, at least in a production capacity yet,
Yep.
which is what I'm hoping for us to change once we start learning a little bit more about how to use these remotely. So I ditched Lambda. And I remembered that the week prior, Cloudflare made an announcement that said, hey, we can host MCP servers. And one of the things that I know about Cloudflare is that they run on magic. And one of the and one of the things that these workers have, which is Cloudflare's version of Lambda, uh, is the ability to have durable objects, so things that can have persistent connections. So I was like, you know what, that sounds like a fitting use case for an MCP server. So Daryl in the comments said Fargate and ECS, yes, totally could do that. Totally could use Fargate and ECS if you're set on using AWS to host these things. I still think Lambda works. I just don't understand how it works. But anyway, so I was all excited and decided to try Cloudflare to host an MCP server. And I've never really used Cloudflare before, but I've always heard good things about the developer experience, and they are correct. The people that talk about it, it was a fantastic developer experience.
Nice.
Was extremely simple to get things up and running. And so that's the first thing we're going to take a look at, is we're going to look at the code for the MCP server, and we're going to look at my Cloudflare dashboard real fast, because I've already been talking for like 15 minutes just because I'm so excited, and the stage is so wide that we have to set. So before I bring up the code, just to say it again, we're about to look at our Cloudflare implementation of a remote MCP server. So that's what we're going to take a look at. Yes. Okay, so Visual Studio Code. Of course, we're going to start off with the code. And we have our, if we look over here, this is not actually the code that I want to show. Stop looking at it. Boom. Okay, so I have this folder. I am going to make this available. It's not available in GitHub yet, but I will make this available immediately after our show for what we're building today. So I have a folder for MCP, and this is the stuff that's deployed into Cloudflare. So inside of our source folder, we have our index.ts. And this is importing, you can see here, like the meat and potatoes of model context protocol stuff. Now this one, I believe, is Cloudflare's package, MCP agent. This one is technically Anthropic's. This is the model context protocol one. So it's how you define your actual server. So we're using TypeScript. I am starting to make the conversion over to TypeScript versus JavaScript. I never thought I'd bring myself to say that.
Oh my God.
But you know what? Compile time issues are a lot nicer than runtime issues. So I really figured that out. Okay. So we're using Neon as our database, our remote database for this. So I'm using the new Secrets Manager, which was also released during Developer Week at Cloudflare, to host my Neon connection string. So we're pulling that out of Secrets. We're initializing our database, which is nothing more than initializing the client, the TypeScript client. Yep. Then we're registering the tools. Tools lives in here, and this is your run-of-the-mill. Everything looks like this. Every JavaScript MCP server looks like this. This is actually flavor 2 of defining an MCP server. So last time, Andres, when you and I built an MCP server, we had one function call that had a switch statement that was every tool that was contained in there, and it was switching on the name of the tool. This, I believe, is a little bit nicer way to do it, much more fragmented. You can define each tool individually with the name, description, the schema,
It
and
seems
then
more
the
to
code.
what we're used to, like adding event handlers in JavaScript, right? So on
Yeah.
boom, it's kind of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Like it.
So there's not a whole lot of magic. We don't have to specifically look at the implementation of this server because that's not what we're about today. But I did change it, and I wanted to show a little bit different approach to defining the server tools. So we're defining each server. We have the schema.
That's using Zod for the schema?
Yes,
There?
this is using Zod to define what the incoming schema is. This ultimately tells the LLM what's required and what's not. And
So
what are
another change from last stream is instead of the pure JSON schema definition, it's using a package to simplify it.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. And then we have the implementation here. So I've separated that out logically just so this could be a little bit cleaner to walk through. So we have 10 or 12 different tools that we have, and they're all garden related. So we've just given the garden app that we wrote before a little bit of a revamp. So we can add garden beds, we can add plants to our garden beds, we can add observations about the plants in said garden beds, and then we can get all of those things back out, which is what gardeners do in usually little notebooks.
Do you have a
notebook? So that's all the tool definition. My wife does. We definitely have a garden notebook. Yes.
That's awesome.
Okay. So we're registering the tools. This is where I fall back to. This is basically spinning up an entire server inside of Cloudflare. So our specific MCP routes is, well, if you're starting with SSE, server send events, let's go in and actually use the MCP server that we created. Otherwise, fall back to this HTML page that says, uh-oh, were you looking for something? Because it's not here. But that's really it. I mean, that's as far as defining an MCP server inside of Cloudflare. That's it. You have your standard server definition that you would do anywhere. Super easy. I need to stop using my hands, messing my camera up.
You're very.
And then, yes. Just gonna do this. And then we use the agent, the MCP agents import from Cloudflare.
Aaron
and it's really nice
good
because
ideas for your garden buddy, Alan.
Yeah.
So it's track how much light, the ground moisture. You can have some sensors there. Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll
so
productize this, Aaron.
Nah, it's already there. It's already there. You can see it has the soil type and the sunlight as values.
Oh, look at that.
It's already there. So thanks, Aaron. Anyway, so we're there. And to deploy this into Cloudflare, it was super easy. There's inside of the package JSON. So this came from a template. I just said like npm create Cloudflare use template MCP server. And I downloaded all this stuff into my GitHub repository. And then I just had to change a couple of things. But it came with this script for deploy. And that was really all that I had to do. npm run deploy, and it goes into my Cloudflare account super, super fast. So it was really easy. If we go over to Cloudflare real quick, I have too many tabs open. Let's see. Hope I click on the right one.
I see London.
Yeah, there's so many. Oh, there it is. Okay. Cloudflare.
Zoom in a little bit on this
one.
Yeah, there we go.
So over here, we have our computes. I'll click on that. This was my test one. This is the one that we're actually looking at. This is our MCP worker. And then it has information about this specific MCP server that we have hosted in the cloud. There's really not much more beyond that I want to talk about with Cloudflare besides, Clap. Really good job, Cloudflare, with this. They made hosting remote ones super simple. Documentation is really good, and the scripts that come along with the templates just work.
And I saw
Super happy with
Wrangler, so not in a ranch situation, but in a technical situation. What is a Wrangler?
Yeah, so you and I are very familiar with SAM. Yes.
Uh-huh.
The serverless application manager in AWS. It's basically the same thing as Cloudflare's version of that. So there's a Wrangler TOML file, or I guess this one's a JSON C file, but this defines your infrastructure. So
Okay.
just like we have template YAML files, this is the same thing. This is Cloudflare's version of that. And then you also use Wrangler as a command line argument to deploy that into the cloud. So it reads this template file and deploys it in.
Cool. Awesome.
Nice and easy. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We love infrastructure is
So
good.
yes. So now that we've spent half of our time today on the setup, because that's not the new part that I really want us to take away. Now we can actually talk about consuming that. And in order to do that, let's take a look at this remotely in Postman. Everybody's coming up with new things, right? Let's talk about Cloudflare, talking about that MIDI thing. Postman, I believe last week, added a way to test MCP servers inside of the application.
Yeah, I saw that announcement.
Which is super nice. Yeah, so I'm going to click on new MCP, and then in here I'm going to change over to HTTP, and we're going to use the address of our worker, specifically that endpoint, that SSE endpoint. So I'm going to click on connect, and I don't need to zoom in, right? We can see okay?
Yeah, I can see fine.
Yes. Okay. So I hit connect, and it brings in all the tools. So the first thing it does is run this tools command, and we can see everything that's in here. I click on list beds, and we can see if I hit the run, I have run into this a couple of times with Cloudflare. Not everything is perfect. All the glitters is not gold. Sometimes a connection just doesn't work. And I found that disconnecting and reconnecting is usually the way to get it to work. And sometimes I've had to do that a couple of times.
Turn it off and turn it back on,
Yeah, it's developers' best friend. There we go. Okay, so I think we might have it working now. So there we go. So you can see we get our response back. I have, 4 different beds listed in my garden right now. So I have left triangle bed, center bed, the melon bed, and the butterfly garden bed. So it does work. If we do get bed, let's look at what I have in the melon bed.
It's nice that it gives you like the little prompt for the input based on the schema you provided. And you're able to change it on either side, right? You could have changed it on the left side where it shows the text box.
Oh, I didn't even see that. That's neat. I did it live update when I changed it over here.
Yeah, they're bound.
That's slick. That's not easy to do.
Yeah,
in a raw JSON editor bound to here. That's pretty cool. So you can see that our connection has dropped again, unfortunately. That's actually really annoying. So I can disconnect and reconnect. And I feel like this is like the penance I have to pay when we're doing things live, is things are just going to go horribly wrong, because it was working so well before. I could run through this whole thing without any issues. Oh gosh. Bed not found, melon bed. It's probably looking for the identifier, not the name. We'll see. Probably. We'll see. I don't know. I could be wrong.
But it's work. I mean, it's communicating, right?
Yeah,
that's
it is there. Yes.
You can test your remote MCP server from Postman.
Yeah, super neat. Extremely useful. I am really tired of using the Model Context Protocol Inspector, because I always have to look up what's the command runner for my CLI, and then have to go over to a browser and go to that local host, whatever port it is, and then it holds on to that port for whatever reason. And half the time I have to like manually kill processes. It's good for what it is, but Postman makes it way easier to test these
Nice.
things. Okay, so
Sweet.
now let's talk about the exciting part. So we have a remote MCP server. We just proved that it works. I mean, somewhat. I mean, it worked. It worked a little bit. We saw it. We saw it working there. And now what we want to do is we don't want to use it in Claude. Honestly, even if we wanted to, it wouldn't work anyway because Claude doesn't support that. The
It
recommended
doesn't. You can't hit a
uh,
remote server. It's only localhost right now for Claude.
no, you cannot. If you want
Okay.
to use a remote MCP server inside of Claude Desktop, you have to use it's called MCP proxy, which is code that runs locally, which proxies the calls to the remote server.
Yeah,
So you're
it's running a mini
still
service and
running.
localhost. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yes.
I see.
Yes. But we don't want to do that, right? We want to be in the cloud the whole time, which I mean,
Yes.
that's kind of what we do, right? We're cloud people, and we're serverless people. So you know what we're gonna do? By golly, we're gonna do it in Lambda because that's what we know. Yes.
Skip.
Yes. So I got really excited because with all the flurry of announcements, I saw, oh, cool. Bedrock has support for their inline agent SDK, which allows you to define MCP servers to create basically an ad hoc agent natively inside of Bedrock, which is
Okay.
great. So I went and I searched for inline agent SDK JavaScript, and that returned no results because it's only for Python.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. So, living on the cutting, bleeding edge, we're just ahead of the curve. That's going to come. I mean, there's no
Yeah,
doubt that we're going to have an inline agent SDK for
for JavaScript.
TypeScript. But as of today, April 24th, that does not exist. So, out the door. So I thought, well, okay, well, let's think of another agent framework that I can create an agent that connects with MCP tools. That sounds like something that I should have a bountiful selection for, right?
Hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of agent tools out there. So of course they support MCP. Wrong. No, they do not. OpenAI has an agent SDK, but only their Python SDK supports MCP servers. So again, I don't really know Python that well. I didn't want to use ChatGPT to write the Python code because I just wanted to hack away. And really, I wanted to understand it, right? So if I
Yeah.
write the code, I'll understand it significantly more than if I vibe it into existence. So looking again for something. Anthropic does not have an agent SDK that I could find anyway, and I really ran low on options. So I started asking people, what exists out there in JavaScript or TypeScript that I can use. And so the answer that I got was hot off the presses, and it is, of course, LangChain. So LangChain,
Okay.
specifically LangGraph, the JavaScript version of that, has the ability to connect to MCP servers remotely. Yes. So it has both support both for the standard IO and for remote. So that's what we're going to look at. So inside of our Lambda function, I'm just going to prep us before I bring the code up. We wrote a Lambda function that is using LangChain JS to create an agent that's going to use OpenAI as the LLM,
Hmm.
and it is going to connect to our MCP server that exists in Cloudflare. So we just have
Okay.
all
Yeah.
these fingers
Yeah.
going out, right? So we have the orchestration framework from LangChain that's calling OpenAI that is using our Cloudflare MCP server.
So
Now,
what's the
when I say all those
compliance on
things,
this implementation, Alan?
it's all open and there's no auth on it at all. Uh, but when you're talking about stuff like this, that obviously gets very complicated very fast. And so I really, really see the appeal of something like Bedrock that
Abstracts
houses
it.
everything all together. Not, yeah, I mean, abstracts it, but all the pieces are there in the
Hmm.
one thing. from an implementation standpoint, but also from a management standpoint. I could go into Bedrock and see everything that exists in one dashboard that's all linked together. I can't really with the implementation we're about to walk through because I have
It's all over the
OpenAI.
place.
Yes, it's everywhere. Right now, that's the beauty of the cloud these days, is that really this whole build took me like 4 hours to make. Once I figured out what the pieces were, which took me longer than 4 hours. Once I figured out what the pieces were, actually implementing it and hacking through took about 4 hours to make. So let's take a look at the code.
Yeah.
And then we'll take a look at the nice user interface that I built on top of it to make it easier.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yes. So code. Let's go back to this repository. And I have this agent Lambda function. And it's going to do exactly what I said already. So we'll talk about Dynamo in a second. It is using the MCP adapter from LangChain.
Okay.
And it is using
OpenAI.
another adapter, right? It's using OpenAI adapter, again, from LangChain. And then it is using this agent. I don't know much about the different types of agents, but the examples that I found on the internet said to use the React one. And that's what I used and it worked. So, so it's using, again, everything from LangChain, right? It's a fantastic orchestration engine or tool set. And it's been around for really since AI went as mainstream as it did. So what we're going to be doing is this Lambda function is an endpoint that we can hit via API gateway. And that API gateway is going to just have a message. It's going to accept a message in the payload. So that's what we're doing. Okay. Parsing out the message property from the payload, we're passing into the endpoint. And then we're going to set up the agent. We'll jump down to that code. What that agent is doing, it's going to load our MCP config, which we'll get there in a second. And it's going to initialize this multi-server MCP client. So that means if I have 2 or more MCP clients or a variable amount, I could use 1, which is what we're going to be doing. I want to initialize that client inside of LangChain. So give me the full config for that. And then, give some error defining things and the config for the MCP servers. Cool?
Yes.
We'll get to what the config looks like in a second.
Yeah.
And then we're going to call get tools, and this is going to go and fetch all of the tools. It's going to run the list tools command from every single one of the MCP servers that I have configured and consolidate them.
Okay.
We initialize a new OpenAI LLM, basically the reasoning model here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we create the agent itself. We say, hey, use OpenAI, and here are your weapons. Yes. Cool. Easy enough. So that's actually creating the agent, and this is considered an inline agent, right? We're taking from nothing to agent that exists dynamically because we're loading the config out of DynamoDB, which is super nice.
Yeah.
Because I don't like deploying static JSON files that have the config. I like things in the database. Call me old school, if that's an old school thing. I don't know.
Yeah, you're kind of in the middle there.
True. Anyway, so all this is doing is querying DynamoDB. It says, hey, give me all the MCP servers that are configured. Run a query for MCP, starts with server. And then it's going to iterate over each one of those and build the LangChain expected structure for each one of those. So the MCP server config is an object with a named server. For ours, it's Garden. We're going to say, right now, we're only supporting server sent events because we only want remote tools to run. So we're saying server sent events. Here's the URL, which is what we put into Postman, right? It's that worker.dev/ssc URL. And then here's some reconnection information, which apparently is very important because we saw how shoddy it was at the moment. So again, it's doing that for everyone, adding them to the config object, and then we're using that config object right here to initialize that MCP clients. Cool, easy. After we set up the agent, so we said, this is the brain, these are the tools you have access to, and then we're going to feed it that message, which came in from the request. And then we're just going to run it.
HTTP call, yeah.
Yep, we're going to run it and print out. We probably should have printed out the response because it's a long response. This is not correct. I wanted something for us to code today. So we were gonna code that or change that on the fly.
Okay.
But if we get there, we get there. I mean, I think we're having a really good conversation here with how this stuff works. So let's should we see it work? Should we actually go in and try to make it work?
I mean, it seems too simple for it to work, but let's see it.
I feel really, really conflicted that you just said that because
you spent like 10 hours.
So I was pulling out my hair over here, figuring out like, well, that doesn't support it. Well, this doesn't support it. Well, this doesn't support it. Well, this supports it, but not in freaking JavaScript. And then I was like, how do you communicate with a remote one? It doesn't make sense. But I am flattered that you think my implementation is simple now that I have all of the pieces together.
Yeah, it's like
this is the way when you look at yeah, what took you so long? When you look at it from a simplicity standpoint, right? What we just did, we loaded config dynamically out of DynamoDB. We initialized a LLM. We said, these are your tools. Here's the config for the tools. Here's the LLM that you want to use. Boom, make your agent. That's how easy it should be, right? We're moving so fast. It should always be that easy. It should not have cost me my right arm to figure out that's what you have to do. And we are getting there. We are getting there. It is going to be significantly easier. And hopefully you guys use this GitHub repo to make it that easy for you, for all of you when you're coming up with these
for sure.
Use cases. But we're just, again, at the front. Things aren't documented. We're really trying hard to piece things together so we can open up the idea toolbox, if you will, the idea box to say, oh, well, if you can do that, then I could probably solve this problem. So that's the objective here. Okay, let's look at a UI that I vibe coded together. Let's refresh the page so we don't see my testing. Okay. So this is an HTML page that is served out of Lambda. You know how I love that. It's just so much, it's just so easy to generate HTML and serve it out of Lambda. These are the MCP servers that we have configured. So we have named our garden server. So if you remember when we were configuring Claude Desktop, we had to give it a name, an alias, basically. That's what we're doing with the name. And then this is the pointer over to our MCP server. And then it has the option to provide headers for things like auth or whatever else you need.
Okay.
So we can talk to the agent. Now, this is the part that's gonna work, but also not work at the same time. I don't have it responding back correctly from the API endpoint, but what we are going to do is we're going to hit the Lambda function that creates that agent, and then we're going to ask it the question. So we're just going to say, what's in my garden? Okay. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to look at the CloudWatch log. What a terrible time for me to cut out. Am I back? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, it was like 10 seconds.
Okay. Really the gist of what I was trying to say while I was out in the ether is we're going to look at CloudWatch. We're going to look at the logs that are output from LangChain so we can see the chain of thought because it's not returning the right format.
And I saw several console logs there, right, in the code, so they should all go there.
Yeah. Yep. So it says no response because we sent back a rather large response, not in the format that you expect. So I am going to bring up CloudWatch. Let me make sure that my session hasn't timed out, and it looks like it has not. So hooray. Okay. So inside of our log groups, agent function. So we have today at 1809. That looks spot on to me. That's the one. Here we go. So this is the MCP configuration that we had. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like. So it loaded this up out of DynamoDB. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, you got my gesture. Look at that.
I did. Yes. So it created the named property garden, which came out of that named property in our user interface. Server sent events. Here's the URL and the reconnection information. Now, the part that we actually care about is in this one. So you can see, I really don't think there's a way I can make this larger on the screen. So we're just going to have to deal with this. So yeah, we can see what's in my garden. Okay. We see what's in my garden. That's the question that I sent to it. And so the AI message doesn't have any content yet because it is reasoning what it has to do. So if we just follow this chain of thought here, it is going through, it's going to do some tool calls. It is doing list beds, right? So that's the first one that it had access to. So it's going to list beds. It got the information from the tool. So there's the information that we saw in Postman, it got it. And then what it's going to do, it has since reasoned, well, that doesn't have all the plants. So now I have to iterate. So it went and did all these tool calls here, which are, let's keep scrolling, get bed. So now it's loading, or it's running those get bed tools for each one of the beds that it got from that list beds command. So we have the left triangle bed, the center bed, the melon bed. That's why it failed before, because bed was capitalized. Case sensitivity gets me every time.
Always.
Yeah, I have a story on that, but we'll save it for another time. But it made me question whether or not I wanted to get into computer science capitalization.
Whoa, that's deep.
Yeah, right. And so it has the tool responses that we got back. So, it listed, I'm going to run all these. Here's the responses back. And then we have the AI message that actually comes back, which is what we should be displaying in that user interface. It says, here's what's currently in your garden. And then it has this nice markdown. Your left triangle bed, it's currently in the center left south side of your garden. It's that size. It has zucchini and carrots and black beans and strawberries and nasturtiums. And it also has information in here as well about the observations that were made. So it loaded observations in here. So I had put in at one point in time that there were some bugs that were on the nasturtiums. And so really this is what we wanted to see on that agent
that tool response,
call. Yeah. But it didn't, I just didn't get there in the prep. But what can we take away from going through these logs? It worked. Yes. So that was a remote call inside of Lambda, loading up that remote MCP server from Cloudflare, and then running those tools, which coincidentally is hitting another serverless service in Neon to load that data out of my database over there, and then return that in a customer-friendly or user-friendly format.
But
I don't think we need to actually make the code work, but
it's getting back to the basics, right? So it's obviously you did a lot of research and finding these, but it's stitching the tools together for your use case, right? Like you mentioned, it's convenient when Bedrock has all this in the same spot, right? But still, if there's a better tool than the one offered by Bedrock for hosting your MCP server, then you can go into Cloudflare, like you said, a lot of jumps, but you can still, it's stitching up the tools with a little bit extra effort for you and me because we're forcing ourselves to JavaScript or TypeScript.
Right. Yeah. So I'm putting myself through that pain. That's for sure. But it's what I know. So, work with what you got. So here's my question to you, Andres. This is the thing that I know you're good at. What we just did, what we proved we can do inside of Lambda is we can dynamically load MCP servers that do whatever, right? As a result of any trigger. It's just a Lambda function. So Lambda functions are tied in and can be triggered by basically anything, right? And they can have all these inputs from all these different AWS services, from just third-party applications making calls. The fact that we were able to do that, and really what we can do is piece that together with a variety of secure MCP servers.
Yeah.
What do you think we can do
Trust
with
it.
that? Because we just proved that we have basically EDA triggers for AI agents that they have access to anything. And now those triggers are really the key to unlocking these really cool use cases, I think.
It's tricky, right? And you saw my in the compliant world, which a lot of people live in. Obviously, the
Mhm.
non-deterministic path that it could take for you in some situations is interesting. I mean, I'm obviously given your prompts and your whether that's a workflow or something, you can protect that a little bit. But I want to make sure it's because I'm thinking of things, but I want to make sure it's not just a if statement that you could do just by code, right? So it's like thinking of telling an agent to, hey, go like the office thing we were doing, right? So for the party planning, right?
Yep.
You have these tools for logistics, right? That they have there's an API to check room availability for something, right? That
Mhm.
an agent could use, and there's an MCP server for that. It can help you just make those decisions based on some parameters that you have, right? And it's not sort of like your business logic code, but there's kind of reasoning behind it, right? So you can check, hey, these are available at this price, and then go check what is a regular pricing for these and make the best decision for what you got, right?
Yep.
The best one that comes to mind is like, hey, do some analysis on something and send an email, right? And that's, hey, you have your MCP server that sends emails, whether that's SendGrid or SES or something like that, right? Draft an email
Mhm.
and send it based on the findings, right? That's the biggest one that always comes to my mind. It's like this: do something and then send a notification using the MCP server of some email sending or message sending provider.
Yep. And that's a really good tangible use case that I think lead people to thinking about things a little bit differently. Uh, that's the first one that comes to mind. Let me one up you, as I like to do.
As always,
I
yeah.
was hoping, yeah, I was waiting for that. That was what my pause was, waiting for you to react like that. Think about this. So we have this Lambda function
Is it this,
that
Alan? Let me pause
it's
there.
not Skynet. No, it's not
Come on.
Skynet. No. Uh, when I think about things that are unlocked with agents that have the ability to reason, they have the ability to scan a lot of data and figure out intent from an enormous amount of data, and you give them the tools to do things with that intent, I think we have game changing abilities on our hands. So here's an example. Let's say you have a set of MCP tools that are basically everything you need for SaaS. Let's say you've connected Stripe, so you have the ability to create invoices. You
Mhm.
have let's say a custom one, or let's say you're using Neon or really any other database provider as an MCP server. So you have the ability to, manipulate data. You have Twilio, so you have the ability to send and receive messages of any kind, right? That's email, phone call, text message. And honestly, you don't need that much more than that. Let's say you have those, and you have this really nice user interface, and all it does is track user interactions. All it does. Buttons don't work, doesn't really do much, but it tracks user interactions. Where are you hovering? What are you clicking on? What's the what's your path, basically, your user journey
Yeah.
through the user interface, right? Every one of those things gets logged DynamoDB. Let's just say that. Okay, it's emitting what you're doing in the DynamoDB, and you have what's it called? The thing that batches the stream, your rolling window. I don't know. I'm really failing this one.
That's,
Your
yeah.
batch size. Okay, your batch size,
Hmm.
because you can configure a DynamoDB stream to run after it receives X number of
Sure.
events, or after a certain amount of time, whichever comes first, right?
Hmm.
Let's say you batch that up to 100 things. What you can do is hook that Lambda function handler to that stream after 100 user micro interactions. You can feed all of the things that the user is doing to this LLM. It can reason what that person is doing, and then it can do it. You don't actually have to implement anything. It has all the tools to write stuff to a database, to fetch things out of a database, to send you a notification, to create an actual invoice for you,
Hmm.
because it has figured out your intent based on what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's kind of predicting based on your patterns, right? But it's
Mhm.
assume it's those things, right? The prediction sounds weird, but yeah, it's predicting, and you can have it in real time, act on that in real time, right? Because you talked about batching. But
Yep.
I think there's so many things, right? And like you said, those like logs, right? And Daryl brings like, yeah, like an AI version of Rum in CloudWatch, where
Yeah.
even not acting on you on that, but just getting, hey, at the end of this user session, right? You got all the logs. You trigger this to then say, hey, what was the most accessed item or what did they do, right? And it's just a summarized version. They went and created an invoice and logged out. And you can start gathering all those things to then say, again, more analysis on that data to say, hey, nobody's going into this page, but it's more on the reasoning side of AI where you have this information. It could be in the database, like I said, and using a daily job accessing the database with the MCP so generate a report, right? And you can have like a tableau,
Tableau. Yep. Yep.
MCP server
Nice.
that goes
Nice.
and creates a report and sends an email to the current CEO, and it knows how to go and get this current CEO by accessing your Active Directory with an MCP server from Microsoft AD, right? Or Entra
Mhm.
ID, let's call it. It's not called
Okay.
Azure Active Directory anymore.
Right.
There's so many things
So,
that you don't
mhm.
code them directly and let room for flexibility to make some decisions on the way, right? That you might not
Yep.
know upfront.
Yep. So let's talk about some of the problems here. Now, one of the things that I learned this week, and here's a very interesting thing, and it ends up resulting in me saying another thing I don't like about MCP in general. All of the tools that you provide to uh, an agent, so all of the names of the tools and all of the descriptions of the tools, those are tokens.
Mm,
Those cost money. So you're paying for the LLM to run every time to know its list of tools that it has access to. So what I don't like, when you think about it that way, what I don't like more often than not, when I have an MCP server, I don't want or need the majority of the tools. Maybe I just have one that I need
Mhm.
of the 10. You can't really select individual tools from an MCP server. So I am paying, in that scenario, 10 times the amount just to have the one that I have access to.
Yeah.
So I don't like that, especially if it's running on some type of inference or reacting to something that's going to be used a lot.
Yeah, I could see a potential there for, I don't know if you remember the intent concept, right? Hey, you have the launcher box or the 9 box on top that based on the context you're at, right, that you're looking for, you can filter that to just the intent, your intent, right? So doing something like that for tools benefit, I mean, the cost saving benefits really spark up a conversation there.
For sure. For sure. And honestly, it feels at this point like it's too early. The ecosystem is too immature to even start talking about cost savings and cost modeling
Yeah.
with all this, because we're not really at a point where the clients and the servers and the security are in a state where I feel comfortable using them in an enterprise environment. There's just too many things missing. We just took a huge step forward with what we demoed today, in the fact that I can host and call MCP servers remote. It's not running on my machine at all, and it was
Yeah.
hands free. Right, the triggers that I have can be completely hands free, no human in the loop. There's some paths that are going to have to be cleaned up from authentication point of view. We're taking a happy path right now because everything that we're using is open. If we
Mhm.
have to go
Yeah.
in and sign in human in the loop, then we've kind of killed the productivity of our AI agent, because it's going to wait for you to sign in. So we have
Yeah.
to figure those machine to machine flows a little bit better and define those, and get those in a safe way where we're not just passing around secrets in a text file. But
Yep. Yep.
I am
Yep.
very excited about the opportunities that are happening and becoming available now, like week after week. The last time when you and I made that MCP server 2 weeks ago locally, we wouldn't have been able to do the demo today. That is not something that we could have done.
That's crazy. But yeah, it's changing by the day, right? So there's new things, and I'm sure in 2 weeks when we're back here, there's gonna be something interesting to try out. Something
That's
new.
right. Yeah. Well, I might start. I know we might get on the phone, and I'll say, forget everything we've said
It's
before,
completely
because it's all
different.
different now. It's way
Yeah.
better. It could be that way. Anyway, so we're about at the end of time. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know the demo was kind of short, but I feel like it was an impactful one, and it didn't really need to be any longer than that. Really at this point, a lot of conversations that we're having around AI, around agents, around MCP, they're conceptual, because the tooling, the clients, everything's not really there yet, but it's starting to form the figments of ideas or possibilities.
It's stitching the tools, right? But there's no easy way to stitch them right now. And just for you, I know Aaron has a lot of feature requests, so they'll start flowing through to make your garden app
Yeah.
more
Yes.
successful or useful.
Yes. So I will get on that note. I will get that repository on GitHub this afternoon. So if you guys are interested in running something very similar to what we did, feel free to copy, paste, replace anything that we have. Really, the important thing for me is that you're doing things safely, and one of
Yes.
the steps toward that is just be in the cloud. Stop running it on your machine. I don't have the trust in the things
Yes.
to run on my machine.
It's scary. It's like when we would do the VS Code live sharing and you would share the terminal. It's like, oh, this is too much control over your machine. That's what you're giving to
Yeah,
with
not a
MCP
fan
server.
of giving an LLM root access to my machine. No, thank you.
Yep.
So look for that later on my GitHub, github.com/Alan Helton Dev. That'll be there this afternoon with all of my API keys redacted. I cannot use anything of
Use
mine.
your own.
Yeah, get your own. Okay, well,
Cool. Good
that's it.
stuff.
Next time, Andres, you and I are actually prepared for the next one. It's either going to be on Wednesday or Friday in 2 weeks, but we're going to take a sidestep in our AI progression, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it's APIs all the way down. So
Yep.
these AI tools are really using APIs, and there's not really getting away from that. So we're going to talk about building strong, secure APIs and how to use them with AI.
So it's, yes, a diagonal step. It's not a complete sidestep.
I guess we can say it's a diagonal step. Yeah, sure. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Hope you guys found this useful. And we'll see you guys later.